In a 19-season stretch from 1994 to 2012, the Kansas City Royals amassed just one winning record and 0 playoff appearances. It was not a fun time, but that one winning season was something special. The 2003 Royals were an anomaly to say the least. Here are the Royals' records leading up to and after that 2003 season: 65-97, 62-100, 83-79, 58-104, 56-106, 62-100. 4 100-loss seasons, nearly a fifth, all within a 6-season stretch, yet in the middle of all that losing was a decent 83-win team. If you're a football fan, a good analogy would be how the Jaguars had double-digit losses in 6 straight seasons, nearly made it to the Super Bowl, and continued on with the double-digit losses. Even though the 2003 Royals missed the playoffs, it was still a special team, and I want to talk about them today. Before we get to the 03 Royals, I want to quickly discuss the team the year prior. The 2002 Royals were a bad team, to simply put it. Manager Tony Muser was fired 23 games into the season after an 8-15 start. After a brief stint with interim manager John Mizrock, Kansas City brought in minor league manager and former major league catcher Tony Pena to be their new manager. Pena finished his first season as manager with a 49-77 record. Coupled with the other two managers, that gave the Royals a 62-100 record overall, their first 100-loss season in franchise history. Entering 2003, the Royals made no notable free agent signings and lost multiple veteran players to free agency or injury, including their top 2 starters Paul Burt and Jeff Suppan, as well as closer Roberto Hernandez. They replaced said veterans and others with, at best, replacement players. If you were a Royals fan entering 2003, you knew this was going to be a rebuilding year yet again. Notable baseball media outlets predicted Kansas City to win somewhere between 64 to 70 games, finishing near the bottom of the standings. But that's not how things turned out. Despite putting out a team of mostly nobodies, despite bringing in no notable free agents, despite having an inexperienced manager who hasn't managed a full season in the big leagues, despite having zero reason to be competitive at all, the Royals started winning. Kansas City won their first 9 games of the season and finished April with a 17-7 record, on top of the American League Central standings. In fact, the Royals were in first place of the AL Central ever since Game 1 of the season and haven't lost that spot since. We'll get back to this. What caused this sudden winning attitude in Kansas City? Firstly, the offense was on fire. Posting an OPS over 800 in the month of April, longtime vets Mike Sweeney, Raul Ibanez, and Brett Maine posted big-time offensive stats that month. The pitching also performed well, posting a combined ERA of 3.68 in the month of April. Notably, interim closer Mike McDougall, who had thrown 24 innings in the big leagues entering 2005, saved 10 games that month, coming as a surprise excellent closer for Kansas City. However, the team, mostly the pitching, was overperforming. The Royals fell back down to earth in May, sporting a 10-19 record, dropping out of first place altogether to the Minnesota Twins. They went from 4.5 games ahead in first place entering May to 3.5 games behind entering June. In the month of May, the hitters' OPS dropped 100 points, while the pitching ERA jumped a full 2 runs. At this point, this is where most would think that the Royals simply had a lucky start to the season and succumbed to their preseason expectations, playing at their typical rebuilding pace. Even bad teams can get lucky sometimes, so this is how Kansas City would be playing for the rest of the season. That was not the case. The offense rebounded in June, led by Mike Sweeney's 1.070 OPS and other contributions. The Royals' offense stayed on track, posting a 795 OPS back to their April levels. Despite the pitching being even worse than it was last month, the Royals put together a winning record in June, climbing to 42-38 entering July, neck and neck with the Minnesota Twins for first place. At this point, I want to stop the video for a moment. I've looked over this team's roster and stats several times and still don't know how they're doing it. The pitching is flat out atrocious. Outside of one starter in Darrell May, there was no pitcher the Royals could rely on in any situation. Mike McDougall was a good, not great closer, and Jeremy Affeldt was great once he moved to the bullpen, but it's just abysmal everywhere else I look. Darrell May was the only starter to reach the 100 innings mark. The only one. In fact, the Royals had 10 different starting pitchers start at least 7 games. In 2003, it was unheard of to have that many guys start at least that many games. I'm not sure if it was just because of injuries or because everybody was so bad the management had to keep finding new starters to pitch, hoping one turned out alright. The bullpen was pretty bad to say the least. Lots of guys with high ERAs and high whips. The Royals did not have a single pitcher in the bullpen where they could heavily rely on. If they were desperate to get an out in a high leverage situation, it was anyone's game. You might as well as draw a name from a hat to see who would come in and pitch. Other than May, if the team needed a starting pitcher to go out and deliver a quality start, they didn't have that. The offense was good up to this point, but not great. They had 2 really good batters, Carlos Beltran and Mike Sweeney, but everyone else in the starting lineup was average. About average. This team had at best 1 powerful hitter, no ace pitcher, a watered down bullpen, and a revolving door rotation featuring pitchers that would normally struggle in the minor leagues. Entering July, not only were the Royals only a half game behind the Twins for first place, and were 4 games over 500, they were in that situation with a negative run differential. They gave up more runs than they scored and found themselves within reach of the division lead. This team had very little going for it, but somehow made it work for the first half of the season. The question is, could they keep this up? In July, Kansas City started the month going 9-3. Thanks in part to a 1-11 stretch by the Twins, the Royals jumped out to first place, leading 7 games over the second place White Sox entering the All-Star break. It was unbelievable in 2003, and it's unbelievable nearly 20 years later. This team that had no business being good this year was 10 games over 500 in the middle of July. In that month, the hitting took a slight hit, but the pitching improved, posting its best ERA since April. When one side struggled, the other side picked up the slack. Given this large lead over the second place White Sox, and a golden opportunity to win the division out of nowhere, you may be thinking, did the Royals make any moves at the deadline to improve their team? Kansas City wasn't just fighting for a playoff spot, they had a large lead for first place more than halfway through the season. It seemed like a perfect chance to go out and trade for an all-star caliber player to push for the division. Make the right moves now, and the Royals can fend off the White Sox and Twins and go to the playoffs for the first time in nearly 20 years. Their last playoff appearance came in 1985. They did not make those moves. The Royals made 2 very small moves at the end of July, acquiring 2 veteran relievers. One turned out well, one not so much. Kansas City had major holes in the rotation and did nothing to bring in a high-quality starter. They could have used a lockdown relief pitcher, one that they could rely on in high-leverage situations, but they didn't get one. Perhaps a bat they could slot in the lineup to provide extra insurance? Nope, nothing. Why didn't Kansas City do anything to improve the team? I don't know, but I have some ideas. Perhaps management within the organization didn't have confidence in the team and did not want to give up anyone in the farm system. Perhaps the management was also just being stingy. In 2003, the Royals ranked second to last in payroll, only above the Devil Rays. They didn't spend money back then, and it's true to this very day. Call it small market or call it being cheap, Kansas City didn't want to take on any big contracts. Lastly, perhaps it was too late for them. The Royals were 11 games over 500 on July 17th with a 7.5 game lead for first place. By the trade deadline, they were still 8 games over 500, but that division lead shrunk to only 1 game. That's thanks in part to the White Sox going 13-1 at the end of July. If, and this is a big if, the Royals were going to make big moves, it was too little too late as their lead evaporated in the span of 2 weeks. Despite the lack of moves and fielding basically the same team as opening day, the Royals stayed competitive. They played mostly 500 ball in the month of August, but stayed neck and neck with the Twins and White Sox for first place. At this point, I would like to quickly mention that the 2 teams competing for the wild card, the Red Sox and Mariners, had much better records than anyone in the AL Central. If the Royals wanted to make the playoffs, it was division winner or bust. As late as August 29th were the Royals still in first place, tied with the White Sox and a half game ahead of the Twins. They would fall out of first place following that day and stay out of first place for good. After that August 29th date, Kansas City finished the season going 13-16, ending with an 83-79 record, 7 games out of first place. They would miss the playoffs and wouldn't have another winning record for 10 years. The Royals in 2003 were an anomaly. They had no business being that good and yet nearly made it to September in first place. When the season finished, the hitting and pitching both fell to below average levels. They couldn't maintain the success they had in the first 3.5 months. That season sticks out among the rest. So much losing in the 2000s, yet in the middle of it all, a winning record. It will go down as the biggest season outlier a team ever had.